Hey guys, and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Diablo 4. Now we've really settled into Season 5 and the dust has relatively settled, we're starting to see the highest point of the classes, at least in this current patch. The best way we're judging that right now is through a combination of pit clears though, the highest levels possible obviously, but then also infernal hordes. Those are our best main relevant endgame options at this point, but all of it at this point is also just kind of for fun. After all, there's not really a reason to clear a tier 150 or something, but it is interesting to look at the highest potential of a class, and then you can compare that in future seasons. On that note though, infernal hordes is definitely not like a challenge at this point. Tier 8 is no problem, just because of the natural progression of builds and perfective items that have been achieved. When we look at the proper top-end version of a build or a class, Tier 8 in Infernal Hordes just proves no challenge. So what it really comes down to there is how effective and fast is the clear, gathering as much Aether as quick as possible in a Tier 8 and then killing the Council as well. So judging it by those merits, certainly some classes are better than others, just at reaching higher Aether numbers. So with those two sides considered, we'll be able to judge how the class performs ranked against each other, so we're going to get into it now, starting with the pit clears. Firstly, the top of the list was Sorcerer with an impressive 157 clear. But, obviously the nerf has happened at the highest versions of Sorcerer. So what we're looking at here is a proven 152 clear post nerf by the player Arcseid. It's still the same build though, which is essentially Lightning Spear. The nerf is interesting in concept because when you're playing in perfect gear and pushing the highest level of the content, it will affect you. Like it's a rough 40% or so nerf for a player that's got that maximum gear and that maximum potential. But interestingly, say for your normal player not doing the highest level content, it's actually something that's not really going to be felt or even noticed in any real way. The idea is that the max stacking potential of your mastery and your lightning spears all at once, that is now much less effective. But when most players aren't reaching those numbers anyway, and they're generating say around 25 or something, they're not feeling it as that kind of compared example. In fact, Josh was telling me that it could be considered a buff for those lower end builds. Therefore, it's gone down from 157 to a 152. Not a massive jump backwards, but an important one to acknowledge. In any case, Sorcerer does have a lot of great meta options for pit pushing and in general endgame, but the best still appears to be the Lightning Spear stuff. And yeah, 152 is still very good. Technically, the highest clear that I can see is a Necromancer clear 154, just 2 ranks above that, and obviously it's just Bone Spirit. Bone Spirit is designed for this kind of content, where you've got a group of enemies that you blow up, then you move to the next group of enemies where your Bone Spirit's ready to go, you've regen, and you blow them up. In terms of single target, it has the highest burst potential that we can do right now. That burst is incredible in the pits. It's kind of what it's designed for, to clear those packs effectively and ultimately still have really effective and impressive, reliable single target DPS. It just requires a lot of input from the player to reach this level of build for sure, but just how you manage your rotations and the buff timings. So technically Necromancer has a 154 clear right now, but I know things are going to change. That is because Rogue and Druid currently have a clear literally one below that. There's an Asian hosted website called Bilibili where multiple players have shown their clears of 153 both on Rogue and Druid. But since I'm not able to get those in high quality, here are just a couple tiers below. Here's some Andariel barrage footage, and it's pretty much what we've been seeing from Rogue for a couple weeks now. Andariel's being the consistent procs you're looking for, barrage being a great combination because it's medium to longer range as an ability, letting you clear effectively. The mobility of the Rogue allows you to zip around super quick and achieve the objectives you want to, whether you're pushing pits or doing whatever content. It never really stops, requiring really high APM to manage. The Rogue does have multiple options in terms of Andariel builds though, they're all going to be good, it's just barrage seems to be the best version. By comparison, Druid can't say the same. Even though they have the same clear of 153, they only really have the one build that's doing anything this season, and that is the combination of the Lightning Strike Storm stuff and Landslide, all relying on bare form as a tanky nature for the build, for the survivability. And the simple explanation is that Landslide is proccing itself, which then enhances your strikes and storms. By comparison, the lightning's going to enhance your landslides, so you're just swapping between the two of lightning and landslides back to back to back while being ultra tanky in your bear. This is really good, not just in pit, because the AoE nature of the attacks means you're sending out the tornadoes, the lightning strikes, the earthquakes around, cleaning through packs in pits and working well in single target, but also, as we'll see, working well in hordes too. But this is really the saving grace of Druid. It's the one thing that's doing super well for them. So compared to Necromancer, Rogue, Druid, and Sorcerer, there's one class that's noticeably lower than the rest, and that's Barbarian with a 140, using a bash build in this case, which is absolutely killer for single target, but struggles in consistent AoE such as content like Hordes, so this is very much more a pit pushing build that has a harder time with the packs compared to other classes and builds, but obviously stands out well in the boss killing part. Still, a tier 140, maybe they can get like a 141, 142, that's still significantly lower than the other 4 classes, and it's really starting to show the difference between them. So what about, say, with the Horde? Like I said, we're thinking about tier 8 only and specifically speed farming it out. So high Aether while also having high clear times, especially when you get to the Council at the end. On that note, technically the meta of it has changed a bit with a recent patch increasing the Aether values for elites, meaning the Exalted, the Surging and Unstoppable elites. They all went from 1 Aether on kill to 2, quite literally doubling their value. So essentially it means Hellborns aren't the clear winner for farming, but they still seem the best type to stack in and increase the value of even now around, faster event spawning options. Since you can get the chance to double elite spawns though, that's going to be much more valuable and therefore you'd lean more into elites. Around the fact they also made Hellfire Rain even more valuable, so the meta is still elite farming around events, be that the specific named elites or Hellborn, whatever the case, you just be avoiding the Lord bosses as usual. With that in mind, who is the best at that kind of content? I believe it's still Rogue and Sorcerer, with incredible Aether numbers coming out. We've seen over 1,000 in some kind of gimmicky runs where they struggle with the Council or the run itself is a bit slower than it should be. A bit more realistically though, you should have good clear times, high Aether and fast Council kills at the end. Between Rogue and Sorcerer, it's hard to pick apart who's above or better than the other really. They're both incredible for the ability to get to the events, to get to the elites or the targets or whatever, get everything spawning in, applying constant AoE burst that's killing everything instantly, ultimately leading to maximum Aether farm times. Really, between Sorcerer and Rogue, it is ultra close. They're both absolutely ridiculously effective at this content. It is made for them. And Rogue and Sorcerer have multiple ways they can run a meta build and do really well, even if it's not their top build. It really is their season. By comparison, the Druid and its Landslide Lightning combo build, their one build, is still really good here too. As I was saying, you have the AoE reach of the Quakes, the tornadoes flying everywhere, and the strikes spamming out and double spawning everywhere too, all around the center of the storm, which is you. You're tanky enough to just kind of ignore whatever's happening and go to the thing and do the thing, but you're not quite as mobile as Rogue and Sorcerer to get to the event, say spawning in the elite by going near it instantly as a Rogue and Sorcerer, where Druid's gonna run over there. It's really, splitting hairs to say stuff like that, but it's true. And if we're gonna rank them against each other, if I can say anything that puts someone above the other, that's what we gotta do. Which is why below that, I put Necromancer and Barbarian. And this one's kind of harder to say between Necromancer and Barbarian being above or below each other. It's awkward for Necromancer, for example, in terms of Bone Spirit. It is not made for infernal hordes. The AoE nature of the spirit is a bit too small, and there's the brief downtime between the next spirit, which is always a problem. The worst part of Bone Spirit is not killing the elites or, farming Aether effectively in theory. It's the fact that you have to kill a bunch of weak, low-level normal enemies to then spawn events on other stuff that actually matters. Once you get into the mid-level waves and beyond, there's so many events and elites going that you're fine. But in the earlier waves, it's actually such a nightmare. The enemies aren't grouped up enough, and there's too much downtime between those moments. Compared to that, Necromancer obviously has Blood Surge, which is generally easier and better for farming out Aether and spamming through the waves. Then it struggles much more by comparison to Bone Spirit at the Council, so it's kind of like a trade-off. If you want ease of farming and chill, you definitely go Blood Surge, but technically your output and potential is much higher on the Bone Spirit. Barbarian, by comparison, is going to clean house, much like Blood Surge, at farming everything and spawning everything, getting great Aether numbers, but will really struggle with the Council, slowing down the overall run. So I kind of put Necromancer and Barbarian at the same level at this point. They just have different pros and cons. Overall though, I think Sorcerer is still number one. Before the nerf, it had the highest pit clear by multiple ranks. And though technically Necromancer holds the top spot right now, things are going to change. They're literally one or two tiers between each other. Meanwhile, Sorcerer is insane for Aether farming and in general ultra fun to play because it has multiple top tier meta builds. For an average player, they can play any of these and do phenomenal. And they have, say, 2 builds that are going to push the highest versions or points of the content that exists. Right behind it though, and arguably same for top spot, is Rogue for pretty much the same reasons. Roughly the equal Aether farming potential, great mobility and speed, and instant access to the DPS. But between Sorcerer's Lightning Spear and Rogue's Barrage and Dariel's build, they both have to have such high APM that it's quite intensive to play over a long time. Below that third then we have Druid, which does have the equal pit tier to the Rogue right now. But the problem for Druid compared to Rogue and Sorcerer is that it has literally one build that works. It works phenomenally, don't get me wrong, but it's just that. That's your only option. Even Necromancer has 2 options. On that note then, I put Necromancer at 4th, even though yeah, it technically has 1 tier clear in pits above Druid and Rogue. Overall, when you look at the class and the way that it works, I don't think for your average player this is a fair judgment. Bone Spirit takes serious work to get functional. Bone Spirit requires actual play and understanding to get to work. You need that 100% crit chance, and then you need to work out crit chance off your affixes on your gear once you've achieved it, slowly changing the build over time, and it's minute changes that really matter that only you can make based on your current gear. Like a guide can tell you these things, you have to work it out yourself. Playing it is also very start-stop, and I just think your average player isn't really enjoying Bone Spirit as much as previous top builds like Minion Necromancer or even Bone Spear and the time that was king for a long while. Even though the build is good, I think your average player is enjoying it a lot less than other builds. Not to mention, it sucks in Infernal Hordes just because of the nature of it. Blood Surge is not too far behind though, with incredible AoE on the one button spam build that it is, but you know, significantly weaker on the Fell Council in the Hordes. And you're not bringing Blood Surge to say the pits by comparison, just in terms of competitive pit clear numbers. Definitely below everything though is Barbarian, with the lowest pit clears by a significant margin, and no ideal build for whatever content you want to do. Whether it's pit pushing, where you're going to do great with single target with Bash, but then awkward in AoE, or Whirlwind, where you take that to the Hordes, but then you're going to have a hard time with the Council with a significantly lower single target DPS. Barbarian clearly, competitively, is behind the rest of the classes this season, so I'm expecting them to get a big push forward in the DLC and our newest season. But there you have it. That's our overview for the general class balance and competitive rankings right now, based on pit pushing and the general details of Infernal Hordes at the max farm value we have now. We know Infernal Hordes tier 9 and 10 are coming. The question is, how much of a challenge are they going to pose, and how will that change things? Until then, I hope the video was useful or interesting. I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.